First Descendant finally launched this week after what feels like a long time. I was excited for this one, the next crack at a looter shooter in a line of multiple of them now. It's natural to try and compare it to a Destiny, or a Warframe, or even an Anthem, but everyone's doing that, everyone's done that. Instead, I want to talk about the First Descendant on its own, standing on its own 2 feet. You can't compare a 10-year-old franchise to a week 1 franchise, despite the fact that obviously, with so many attempts in these kind of games, there's been so many lessons to learn through both the success and the failures of previous games. The First Descendant has had a right crack at it, but unfortunately it's just not quite working for me. However, I do think that this one is going to find an audience and a consistent player base. There's a lot to dive into, highlighting both the good and the bad. As always with me on this channel, I don't just shit on things for the sake of rage bait or any of that. If I'm talking about something, it's because there's stuff I liked or something that I think is interesting worth talking about. What I always think with any of these kind of games is you really should seek out multiple reviews or impressions and see who you align with, but even with that, this game is free to play. Make your own mind up at the end of the day. But here's just my thoughts on the First Descendant. I'm going to start with what I actually like about the game. It's got all the staples of a looter shooter. I think the gunplay is okay. Feedback can actually feel pretty nice on some of the weapon archetypes here, particularly the hand cannon getting a headshot, or the assault rifles, which the ones that matter the most to me, as they're always my 2 favourite classes of weapons that I use in any kind of looter shooter. I also think that Nexon did a pretty good job with the onboarding. When you get into these looter shooters, you often feel overwhelmed. Here, I felt it was like pretty good, pretty digestible. You get absolutely showered in loot, and I had a fun time mucking about with all the different weapons that it offers you, from scouts to sidearms to snipers to shotguns to launchers, and the fact that you can hold 3 weapons at once really allows you to experiment quite quickly to find the weapons that you enjoy most here. It also gives off that satisfying feeling of getting so much loot and collecting it that you're always, ooh, let me have a look at this one, or ooh, let's try this one out. And the loot itself, it looks amazing. The design of the weapons reminds me a lot of Outriders, which is a huge compliment because their designs were fantastic and quite visually distinct. In the 12 hours played, there was a good amount of variety in both enemy designs, but also the mechanics of how the bosses functioned. In different crit spots, how they were shielded, how you take them down, how they may damage you, even if the enemy AI left quite a bit to be desired. Probably my favourite encounters are the Void Intercept battles, which are raid light encounters against some gargantuan boss with weak points, wipe mechanics, and just a big grand stage to run around in. I think the biggest thing with this game is how much better it is with other people. It makes missions fly by quicker, or how much fun it can be chaining together your abilities and just decimating the battlefield. The game itself is based on Unreal Engine 5, which can mean some of the environments look fantastic, but I'm going to come back to this particular point later. One thing that may go under the radar by a lot of people, but I think really needs to be praised, is the amount of quality of life features that are present at launch here. We're talking about mass dismantling of loot and resources, a postmaster for lost loot or being over encumbered, crossplay at launch, easy navigation between all the different menus, really good tutorials, inventory filters to sort through, a lot of graphical options on PC, a fully working text and voice chat, guidance before each mission starts with an estimate of how long it should take, which means it's very aware of your time. I know a lot of these sound basic, but you'd be shocked how many of these things come after launch in most games. Crossplay day 1 is huge, and honestly, really good work by Nexon to have all this stuff in for launch. The Descendants themselves have really fun toolkits. I didn't get to play as many, but between playing with others and switching between Bunny and Lepic, you can really see some of the synergy between the tool sets that are available to each character here. Some of the Descendants have great voiceover work, and there's definitely some familiar voice talent in this game, that's for sure. But there's something that is so central as to why I think it's not clicking with me. I feel like the game really lacks identity. I mentioned before the game graphically can look fantastic, but the game has such Unreal Engine tech demo vibes to it. There's nothing memorable about any zone that I went to. I just think of grass, stone and swamps. There's nothing really there that makes it stand out, and I also think that that's on display throughout all the game's core systems and just the game itself. Apart from the Descendants, who all have some unique standout, whether that be visually or what they can do on the battlefield, everything else just screams generic to me. The story just offers absolutely nothing. From average writing at best to the usual MacGuffin of the Iron Heart that everyone's chasing, the villain is like a summation of every bad villain that we've had in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I can tolerate most stories, but even me, I was just skipping through a lot of the dialogue outside of the cutscenes. Something that I talked about last week when I was talking about the First Descendant was I hope that this game would break the trend of looter shooters just having stories that were a means to the end game. The thing here is, after 12 hours, I'm maybe close to halfway through the story, and I think that's part of why I'm at this point of unwillingness to carry on. I also mentioned that the loot is great to be showered in, but as of this current moment, I'm just constantly in my inventory dismantling stuff and just equipping the most high level stuff. It hasn't been interesting other than looking at what archetypes I like using. I've used 2 ultimate weapons now and started to level those up, and they are fun, and I can see where the synergy with builds will come with those. But I think other than the story, the structure is what really killed this game for me here. For every main mission you'll do, you'll have to complete the outlying mini missions in each zone. Sometimes that's 2 mini missions, sometimes that's 6. These are like little public events or patrols that can be done with others, and you can zoom through them when you're doing it with other people, but alone they can feel incredibly tedious, extremely generic, and just almost infuriating at times. It can be standing in a zone and defending it till the timer expires, killing waves of enemies until a boss spawns, traversing around a map trying to collect orbs before the time limit expires, those kind of things. In fairness, they try to add variety here, but there's only so much you can do, and when you factor in the lack of visual identity into each of these biomes, that's where I just got pretty bored. And with AI not really doing anything but running in a straight line and shooting at me, it just didn't really have any main appeal. The final part is the monetization. This was always the trade-off when it comes to this being a free-to-play game. The lowest of barriers to entry that comes at the highest trade-off of time versus money. From what I've seen, other than cosmetic items, everything can be earned in-game, which is fantastic. But that comes at the cost of playtime, because it has to be tuned to make those microtransactions as appealing as possible. I actually think, for a free-to-play game, it's not too bad, but that's more a reflection of what's happened to video games with microtransactions, and I also think I'm more tolerable to them than most people are. Here's the thing, these are just my impressions after 12 hours of the game. I don't think I'm going to continue with it, and that's okay. I have my live service looter shooters. The thing I will say is, I think this game is going to find an audience. Look, I went through the good and the bad of what I found without comparing it to other games, but I am going to bring those games back in to make my final point here, which is a positive one. I think what the First Descendant has at launch is more than what Destiny 2 had, or Anthem, or most looter shooters had in terms of pure content. You've got mini raid boss encounters, a variety of smaller missions, 20 playable characters at launch including the ultimate versions, which like obviously yeah, you have to grind for all of them, you only get one that you unlock at the very start and then one that you get for a quest, but still the point remains, there's a lot of characters there to choose from. All those quality of life benefits that I mentioned, it has all this stuff, but it's lacking the thing that makes me want to play a video game. A clear identity. From environments, to its plot, to its characters, it just doesn't grab me as a world that I want to invest time into, that I want to learn more about. And that's okay, but my issue is it spends so much time trying to make me care about all this stuff, rather than just get me to where it wants me to actually go and utilise the various Descendants, its ultimate weapons, and build my best build to tackle its void intercept missions at the most challenging difficulties. This game, I think, will be successful, because it comes at a time where a Destiny or a Warframe, the investment to get into those is so high, and this is new. This is a brand new entry point, and it has that outside appeal. I don't think the First Descendant will land for a lot who have invested time into a Destiny or a Warframe or a Division, but I think for those looking to get into something new for the first time, there's something here that people will enjoy, and I think this game will do well. But that's just my thoughts on the First Descendant. I want to know, what are you thinking so far? Are you going to check this one out? If you have, let me know your early thoughts. As always, the only thing I ask is you keep it civil. If you enjoyed hearing my thoughts, clicking the like button helps me out in what can be a tough old algorithm out there. Other than that, if you stuck around to hear everything that I have to say, and you like what I do here where I talk about what I enjoy, or at least what I find interesting, consider subscribing, as that is what the goal is. Never be the guy that's just rage baiting, and try and have an optimistic outlook. As always, all my socials are linked in the description down below, so you can find me on those. Other than that, I hope you have a terrific day. Look after yourself, and I'll catch you next one.